Richie, this is Myers Raymer. Did Jen leave? I don't see her on there. There she is, right there. Jen, you want me to go ahead and go, buddy?
Go ahead whenever you're ready.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
That I was waiting for a drum roll or something, and sorry. It's so cool seeing you cats here. Some of y'all I remember seeing from other Zooms, and it's just a treat to see you again. Jen, I wanted to thank you publicly for your patience as we tried to figure out how to get me on here. My dadgum schedule is so goofy with work and some other stuff that I'm dealing with, and it was just trying to work it out was tough. But you were patient, and I sure appreciate it. Love you guys. For those I haven't met, my name is Myers Raymer. Very grateful, recovered dope fiend from hell, and I'm so delighted to be here with y'all. I've got sometimes my head gets to where it's exploding because I got so much stuff that I want to talk about. We've got like 18 minutes, and so I'm gonna do the best I can. What I wanted to do, if you got a big book handy, that's groovy. If you don't have a big book handy, it won't matter a bit because I'm going to read a couple of things. What I want to try to do is read 2 paragraphs and paint a mental image of each one of those paragraphs, and then we'll talk for just briefly about that. But I think that you can see where I'm headed once we get started on that. Most of y'all have heard of the bedevilments in the U.S. version of the big book. The page numbers get goofy sometimes on the some of these different versions, but I'm on page 52, 2/3 of the way down the page. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Now, the irony of that is that if I was describing me or you in the middle of our addiction, none of us, we wouldn't even do any head scratching. I mean, we would just go, yeah, so what? I mean, this is what our life looks like in the middle of dope hell. But what about if we were sober? Let's say we were 10 years and this was manifested. All of a sudden you have to look at it and go, wow, that's a different way to look at that. And yet how many of us have lived through that and experienced that with the men and women that we've sponsored? People with long-term sobriety that sound just like that paragraph. They're being destroyed by the bedevilments, this restless, irritable, and discontent that comes back. Now, so flip over to page 75. So I'm halfway down the page in the little 5th step promises, and I just want to read part of this. This should be an exact opposite of what we just read. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. Now, we may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we're on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. Wow. So, I sobered up in January of 1988. And most of you have heard my story, and I won't get into much of it, but I just wanted to tell you, at 7 years in these rooms, I'm a suicidal mess. My family is scared spitless of me because they don't know who's coming home. Is it going to be some spiritual guy that just left a meeting, or is it going to be some jerk? Some of y'all have lived that nightmare. My kids are scared of me. My wife wants me to live in the other end of the house. They're sitting there trying to figure out what to do with this crazy man that's been sober, no booze or dope, for 7 years. This is the irony of the whole thing, is that when you stand where I'm standing, looking at almost 35 years of sobriety, I see a sea I'm talking tens of thousands of people that I talk to in AA that believe that the cornerstone, the center of our program is a meeting. How many meetings you going to? Meeting makers make it, and all. You see what I'm saying? But how come it is that so many of us that are going to meetings still get sick? I'm not saying don't go to meetings. Y'all don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying don't. I'm just saying sometimes what's really important is getting some clarity around who we really are. How many of y'all have ever gone back to page 62, 63, and 60, 61, 62, and 63, that little 2.5 pages right from the ABCs right over to the third step prayer? If you read that, how many of y'all have ever read it and recognized that you were a stage character? That stone cold sober, you were still a bit of a con man. You were still trying to make sure that everybody did what you wanted them to do. We're like the actor trying to run the whole show. Here's the deal, y'all. It doesn't make any difference if you're a total jerk in AA or in CA. If you see it, the guys that scare me shitless are the guys that don't see it, that want to lean into this idea that because they're sober one day at a time, that they're getting everything that they need to get out of the program. I think the $64,000 question, the biggest question we can ask ourselves, in my experience in recovery, in my experience working the steps and being in these rooms, am I getting the things that I need to get? Am I growing emotionally and spiritually? Am I helping others? I mean, all of these questions that come into this thing, or am I just content with being sober one day at a time? I got to tell you, Bill Wilson and the first 100, they never intended for it to be this way. They never did. They intended for us to have an experience that was much more like the second reading where those promises were. And I think a lot of us feel like that's just rhetorical, that we really can't have that sort of life. But I think it's important to look at your life. Once you begin to realize that maybe your recovery is not what you want it to be. Maybe there's more. In the words of Mark Houston, I smell more. Maybe if it is more, what can I do to get there? Well, first you have to realize where you are. You have to set your own baseline of where you are in the bigger picture. Am I sober and leaning more into the bedevilment paragraph that I read? Am I feeling kind of useless? Am I sort of one of the things that I've seen thousands and thousands of times in these rooms are men and women who mean well. Their intentions are good, but because of the things that they stop doing, they tend to drift sideways. And pretty soon, their restless, irritable, and discontent comes back into the picture, and they find themselves doing the craziest things or leaning into other things that turn out to be problematic. How many of us have ever sponsored somebody and we were dealing with one addiction, and then at some point in time, these folks drift into some other addiction as if it's okay because it's, at least I'm not in a dope house. So it's okay if I'm spending 2 hours every day on porn sites looking at weasel porn and crazy shit that I shouldn't be looking at. Y'all get that? Don't look at weasel porn. Okay. It's bad for you. Y'all understand my baseline for so many years was, well, I'm sober today. I'm sober today. And I could just check it off the list. But it never occurred to me that maybe what the founding fathers of Alcoholics Anonymous intended for us to get was a life completely transformed into something that maybe I've never experienced. Maybe I have no idea. And when I met Cliff Bishop and Joe McQuaney of Joe and Charlie guys, and when I met these guys and they started trying to pull me with this vision of how much more there was, I did what I do best, which is kind of push back on a lot of it. And it wasn't until I started getting sick again in the rooms that I finally said, man, I got to do something else. And then they were right there to help me see, Myers, there's a world of things out there that you need to be doing, but you're not doing it. So let me circle the wagons on this real quick. Let me just close this. What Clifford and those guys finally told me is that if I would focus on somebody else, my life would get better. And it didn't make sense to me intellectually. And I remember laughing at both of them and pushing back and saying, that's not going to help any. And then Clifford says something. He said, Myers, why would Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob and those guys write a text that keeps repeating work and self-sacrifice for others, work and self-sacrifice for others? Why would they write it if it wasn't true? And I said, the reason you don't believe it is because you haven't experienced it. But if you would just try it. And he said, one of these days, and it was probably the most profound thing that any of those guys ever told me. Clifford pulled me aside one day and said, Myers, you're now in these rooms 10 years and you're still struggling. And I got to tell you, until you recognize that you are here in this room tonight to feed, not be fed, you're going to stay sick. What you have to realize is that your job is to feed others. Your job is to be there to help others as they suffer with a solution that works. And the moment I absorbed what he said and got off my lazy, skinny butt and got out there and started trying to help folks, everything in my life shifted. Everything changed the moment I did that. It still, to this day, makes no sense to me intellectually. I can't explain it. But what I can tell you is this. If you'll spend more time with God's kids and a little more time with God every day, step 11 and step 12, you will find that your life becomes transformed and that you will find that it's a life that you never dreamed that you could live. And the old thoughts and the old attitudes and the old way of doing things will disappear. And you'll begin to realize that living on this earth now is pretty badass, and that we've been given a chance to not only alter lives, but in some cases save lives. And that's pretty remarkable. The only thing that stands between us and that way of life is us. It's like the millions and millions of us have done this and had life-changing experiences. But sometimes we get so caught up in our old ideas about this stuff that we just don't pay attention to it. Let me tell you this real quick and I'll quit. Since the Zoom stuff started 2.5 years ago, I've done a lot of Zooms and enjoyed them. It's been pretty fun. But I've been asked 3 times now to come and visit. We want you to share, but don't talk about God. I always kind of get taken back like that. I said, wait a minute, I want to make sure that I understood what you said. You want me to come share my experience, strength, and hope. That's what you just said. But you don't want me to talk about a relationship with my Creator? And they go, yeah, it's controversial. Guys, I hate to bring this up, but at the center of our program is a relationship with our Creator. And we can soft sell it. We can back away from it. We can do whatever we want to. But the degree of your serenity, the degree of your freedom in this program depends upon that relationship and your willingness to, regardless of what you know or don't know, your willingness to move towards that relationship and give it a little time is going to make all the difference in the world to the quality of what that relationship looks like and what your program looks like. There was a guy one time, a kid, I share this all the time lately because it always makes me laugh when I think about it. This kid could have been 19 years old, and we were in a meeting one night, and he said, I had a long conversation with my sponsor today, and my sponsor asked me this crazy question, and I want to ask you all that question. And I just smiled at him, and he said, he said, if God was your girlfriend, would she be happy with how much time you're spending with her? And it's funny, the way he said it, I kind of smiled and I went, holy cow, that's that's real. Come on. If we took a straw poll tonight and just voted, and everybody just voted how much time they're spending with God today, it would be fascinating to see how many folks would line up with my old way of being, which was, I'll spend time with God as I back my pickup out of the driveway heading for work. God, please don't let anything weird happen today. I mean, that's like the extent of it. But how do you build a relationship with that kind of time? You don't. You couldn't build a relationship with anybody with that kind of time. What you need to do is spend some time. You don't have to understand it all. You don't have to intellectually connect up the dots. But how cool would it be is if you could just make a commitment to take an extra 3 or 4 or 5 minutes a day, just sit still in the presence of your Creator and watch how your life begins to change. Okay, I stirred the pot enough. I think probably y'all could figure out something to talk about on that. And so I'll shut up and listen. Thank y'all.
Thank you so much, Mark.